Denis MacShane, the UK's former Minister for Europe. Denis, if you don't mind, I'd like to just use you as a case study to remind our international audience why Brexit is so important. So are you a Remainer or a Leaver?
I believe passionately that we should not amputate ourselves from Europe. We should work collaboratively with all our European partners, help countries like Turkey, for example. I supported the early efforts of Turkey this century to get closer to Europe. And it's just nuts. I mean, for 500 years, Britain has been part of Europe. Our trade, our commerce, our military, our services, our city, all depended on the closest interweaving with Europe. And then along came the Brexit referendum. And very interestingly, David Cameron was also advised he would win the referendum. And Boris Johnson's been advised he would win this court case. You do have to question the quality of advice, or perhaps the people that our prime ministers surround themselves with now. Because in the old days, the best and the brightest of the land went and worked for the prime minister and helped him through these problems. But who on earth is advising Boris Johnson?
OK, so you've laid out your case for why you're a Remainer. I won't bother to put the Leave side of the argument, but pretty much a Leaver would argue with every single point you've made and to say that the UK can do it all on its own and that it will benefit. OK, those are the basic arguments. You made yours much better than I did for the Leave side, by the way. What do you think is going to happen on October the 31st? Boris Johnson, now that he's been told that what he did to Parliament is illegal, is he going to stick to his timetable and take the UK out at the end of next month?
It is the most extraordinary shock. I mean, no one has got a precedent for this, literally no one. People talk about the 17th century and King Charles I. Well, for heaven's sake, that was a long, long time ago. It's a bit like maybe what Viktor Orban does in Hungary, just suspends parliamentary democracy and imposes his own will. I don't want to make any comparisons with Turkey or President Trump, but, you know, some people will. But in essence, Mr. Johnson hasn't got a majority in Parliament. This has all happened because he thinks he can be the Prime Minister without having a majority in Parliament. So I hope he is prepared to compromise, because if not, there's going to be a full head-on clash, and the only losers will be British businesses that will find they can't sell into Europe, British citizens who find they can't live in Europe, and the EU as a whole, because Brexit under all its variations, there's no good Brexit, but Brexit under any variation is lose-lose for all of Europe and especially for Britain. So I just hope Mr. Johnson, frankly, many people think he should resign. Basically, he asked the Queen to sign an order to suspend Parliament so he didn't have to face any questioning, any criticism. She did what the Prime Minister asked, and now 11 Supreme Court judges have said the act was not legal. Well, I mean, making the Queen commit something that isn't legal? I mean, what kind of Britain are we?
It is absolutely astonishing when the rest of the world is watching what's happening in this country that was a bastion, I say, perhaps it still is, of democracy and democratic institutions. We could talk, you kind of hinted at it there a bit, we could talk about Boris Johnson's character for a long time. But I want to ask you something about the effect that the Brexit debate has had on the United Kingdom. How long do you think it's going to take for the country to reconcile itself between the two sides? The rancor has been absolutely immense over the past few years. What damage has it done to civil society?
It's like a religious war in the old days, or even a religious war today between Sunnis and Shias. It's like the Irish question, the Catalan question, the Greek Asia Minor question. These things can last for a long time. I've written a new book. I don't want to promote it particularly tonight. It's called Brexiternity. Brexit will be an eternity, whatever happens. A referendum, a new general election, Prime Minister Johnson staying, Prime Minister Corbyn coming, whatever, we are going to be under the impact of Brexit, our politics, our business life, our social life, for years and years to come. And I think the quicker we can sort this out, probably in my view, I wasn't happy with the idea a year or two ago, but I think only a new referendum can change things. It took the Swiss people 6 referendums before they agreed to have the right to vote for women. It's taken us one referendum in 2016, nearly 4 years ago, with a very narrow majority to leave Europe. Maybe after 4 years of new information, facts, consideration of all the difficulties, it's time to ask the people again.
A consultative referendum indeed, wasn't it, Denis? Not a legally binding one. Denis MacShane, thank you so much for joining us on the News Hour.